G'day jabronis and welcome back to week 1 here of the GBA Season 8 Power Rankings. I am the Verd and of course I am not alone, I am joined by my lovely co-host Aberforth.
Hello.
So, 1 week down where all the first week's battles have gone and we're going to be doing less talking about drafts and now more talking about team building, battling, all that stuff. More of that good analyst stuff that everybody enjoys. So, first thing though that we're going to kick off with, Abe, is the bottom 2 teams who, I had them at the bottom 2 to start everything, and you've now joined me on the Columbus Chew. Obviously, like we said, Cybertron was going to struggle to perfectly adapt to the draft format, and he admits that himself in his battle video. How do you feel his first match doing like this kind of draft league went though?
He really showed his familiarity with VGC in it, and he was assuming VGC sets and stuff, which is just a matter of not knowing singles. He said as much himself in his video. I liked the fact that he didn't have any fear, and that might be a bit odd, but when he was talking about what he'd do if Jolteon came in, he immediately went, "I'm going to hard switch into Pelipper." And I do like that about him. I think that that's something that you can't really teach. You've got to either have that lack of fear or you don't, and it's good to see that he does have that. But he did get a bit single-minded on his opponent's movesets, like Trick Room on Cresselia, Sunny Day on the Tornadus T, and alongside that, the fact that he even admitted that he prepped very quickly this game meant that this isn't the best we're going to see of Aaron this season, I'm certain. It was a bit of a rough week, and I think he'll struggle to adapt in the first couple weeks, but I expect him to be quite a force going into later weeks of the season. But he was my bottom ranked team, he lost, and I can't really move him up, so.
Yeah, I'm not really going to touch more on that one. You basically covered everything that would need to be said. I think it was just a rough first week, a very good opponent in John, and he definitely can do better, and we know that he can do better, and we're looking forward to seeing, I guess, where he goes from here, because I definitely think he has the ability to improve and be a very good player by the end of the season. But moving on to 15, as I said, the Columbus Chew. Again, a team that had a pretty rough first week up against the Milwaukee Bewares. I had issues, like I said, in the initial power rankings about the overall balance of the team and how it would be able to deal with things, and like that was a very case in point for this week. Like obviously Wolf brought a very good circuitry set for the matchup, and just over time I think because Wolf has got so good, he was able to systematically take down the Columbus Chew, and I just felt that a lot of plays that Coach Zed chose to do just didn't make sense. But I think that also just comes down to maybe either unfamiliarity with the Mons, or just not knowing the right play at the right time. And a lot of times, Wolf just with knowing, like, through playing VGC and then also having that single season, he just knew when to take advantage of the game. And I mean, once Clefable went down, that game was pretty much just done. I don't really have much else to say about that one. Again, a team that I had down to the bottom, they lost, so they stayed down to the bottom. But
yeah, I'll briefly explain why I moved them down lower than another team that lost that was below them to start with. I really didn't like the way Coach Zed played this game at all. He overpredicted with his Clefable, which ignored the risk-reward factor, and it was heavily skewed because he needed the Clefable, in my opinion. He allowed Wolf to dictate the flow of the game. You can't name a turn in the game where Wolf didn't know exactly what was happening and know exactly what his plan was. And then he ended up allowing the P2 to be knocked off when it was the only thing that could really deal with the circuitry left on his team. And generally, his lack of prep for Tangrowth, one of the better mons on Wolfie's team, just shone through, because even turn 1, he led off with Tangrowth against Sneasel and he missed an icicle crash, but it would have done 50%. Tangrowth would have still done the 70-odd% to the Sneasel, and then switched back in, and hey, it's back at full basically, and you've still got to deal with Tangrowth. And I don't really see how he prepped for Tangrowth at all, really. And the fact that he just didn't play this game well at all has meant that I've dropped him lower than coaches that were below him in my initial power ranking, but who I feel played better this week.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. I think that either some transactions need to be made, or just like a bit more improved battling needs to be done, because the team like isn't really that bad. It's just, I don't know, we'll see what happens with it. But moving on to a team actually that I have 13th and you have 14th, we'll talk about the Victorian Shadows, Necro Stevo. Again, another team that had a pretty rough week 1. I would say that, like, I mean, we were just having a discussion about this before, and one of the big issues we had was that, you know, Stevo didn't really have a check on his team to Zygarde, and like, you would say Fortress would be, but then, like, if you're gonna play Fortress as the check to Zygarde, you don't double out predicting, you know, something else to happen. You keep it in, you deal with the threat that it's designed to deal with, and then it's done its job. I think that, you know, the issue he had too was that a lot of his normal ground checks, being like, you know, Alolan Exeggutor and Rotom, just didn't match up well against Doggo at all. Like, Doggo would just destroy both of them. And so off the bat, he just was on the back foot there, and he really wasn't able to pressure Doggo accordingly, and when he had the chance to knock it out, he chose not to. So, I mean, it was pretty unfortunate for him, because Doggo put in a massive amount of work, so had to put him down quite low due to that performance.
Zygarde, when your ground resists just don't come, and they're not brilliant checks to Zygarde in the first place, I don't agree with switching out your one mon that can actually take another hit from it into your main offensive way of dealing with it. I understand what he was trying to go for there, trying to grab offensive momentum, but in this instance it really just didn't work, and it's like what I said with Coach Zed, it just ignored the risk-reward factor there, because the reward was quite minimal compared to how huge the risk was, and it ends up costing him.
Yeah, I think even like, as silly as it sounds, a set like Habanberry, Alolan Exeggutor, because that could have come in every time on arrows, and then if Jolt tried to mix it up with like arrows or something, it could take it and then knock Doggo straight out. And Exeggutor could still synthesis up, it could still like Leech Seed, Celesteela, or even like go for Fire Blast. It wouldn't have been a bad bring in the matchup, I don't think. But regardless, we're going to move on. A team I actually have down in 14th, so I have the Shadows in 13th. In 14th, I actually have the Detroit Steel Wings. Now, I had them above the Shadows beforehand, but I've actually put them down below. It's a bit of a weird one. I guess I'm going to try and justify it. In my mind, and like Gator explained it really well in his battle video, that, you know, Crimson had a really good matchup, like insanely good matchup. The combination of Infernape and Thundurus Incarnate, due to both of them having poison coverage, were able to absolutely rock Gator's team. And the reason why I've got Crimson quite low in this ranking is that I feel, in my opinion, this was a matchup that he should have won. Like, he had perfect matchup. He, you know, set things up quite well early with the Thundurus, but then, you know, it was down to that 50-50 of, oh, was he Scarfed Heatran, was he not Scarfed Heatran, and, you know, decided to switch out, and then, you know, Gator kind of took control from there. So I have Crimson quite low because I feel like this was a game that he really should have won, and that's not to take away from the fact that Gator played incredibly well, but more in the sense of a player where you get put in those positions where you have the favorable matchup, you have to take advantage of that. You've got to try and, you know, stamp that authority home, and unfortunately he didn't do that, which is why I put him a little bit lower than Stevo, because Stevo didn't have good matchup. Like, granted, Stevo didn't play that well, but he didn't really have a good matchup against Jolt, whereas I feel that because Crimson did, I'm going to put him a bit lower because of how heavy his loss was to Gator.
Well, I've put I've put Crimson at number 12, so only one place above what we've already talked about in number 13. And I had him at number 4 in my post-draft power rankings, so he's taken a hit of 8, which I think is my biggest swing, I'm sure.
That's a big one.
But there were a number of times I just didn't like the way he played. I feel like he could have prepped a little bit better, but when you set up Thundurus like that, and then you switch it out, your Thundurus has shown basically all of its moves, because you know it's also going to have electric coverage, so it leaves one move you don't know, and it's down at 50% in Toxics, and you've accomplished nothing with it. and that was too early to set it up to not take advantage of it. And then I also didn't like the way he treated Superior like it wasn't much of a threat. It's a bit of an odd one, I know, but the fact that when he was in Jirachi versus Superior, and he'd gotten paralyzed with the Jirachi, and then just was treating the Superior cavalierly instead of realizing the risk of something like a subset, I didn't like the way that Crimson played this game at all. He didn't manage to beat the Heatran down in any way, shape, or form, and ended up needing to sack off Mons to stealth rock to avoid giving Gator huge differential advantage already. And frankly, if you're doing that in a situation where you have a favorable matchup, I do not think that that's a very good showing on you at all.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. I think also, actually I'll discuss that when I talk about Gator now, because he's my 12th overall, which is, I'll admit, it's pretty rough putting Gator 12th, because granted...
Oh, dude, we'll get to that.
because of how tough the matchup was, and how well Gator played around it, but I think it's kind of a bit of a 50-50, because it's down to, yes, Gator did play well, but at the same time, Crimson didn't play well. And this actually was the point I was going to get to. With Crimson, I said it in the first week that I think Crimson drafted a very good team, but as I said, I'm not completely sold on his battling, and this week kind of backed up my earlier statement. I think that, you know, he just needs to understand the battling side of things a little bit more, and then his play will increase exponentially. But onto Gator, yes, it's pretty rough to put him down this low. I put it. I guess my issue with my rankings was that obviously you plummeted Crimson down quite a way, and with me, the reason why I rank a lot of teams quite highly is because I not only have backed them because they have good teams, I back them because I think they're going to do well for the season. And so for me, although Gator played very well in this first week, there were a lot of teams that are up a lot higher that I've dropped down, and I'm not willing to plummet a lot of these teams down. I think, you know, Gator winning, he's moved up a couple of spots, and he might keep on moving up a couple of spots, but it's not going to be that insane from one polar to another for me, because it's just 1 week. You don't know what's going to happen for the rest of the weeks that are happening, so he's going to move up a bit, and some other teams have moved up a bit, but I'm not going to just be yeah, let's shoot him straight to the moon because of one game. Granted, the game that he played was incredibly solid. Being able to knock out that Suicune with Devastating Drake was massive. Being able to bluff out the Thunderous was huge, and like you said, Superior put in a ton of work. So Gator played incredibly well, took advantage of what really shouldn't have been his game to win, and did great, and that's why I have him in 12th. Obviously, you're saying that's a bit low. I feel...
We'll get to him when I cover him.
But you're number 13 in Aster.
My number 12, Aster. 13? No, yeah, 13. My bad. Yeah, Aster. Well, we were just talking about someone who didn't play well in Crimson, and Aster didn't play very well against Envy at all. I've got him solo down because Envy dominated Aster this week, and there's no real kind way of saying that, but there was not a single turn when I was watching either of the commentaries where I didn't think Envy had full control over the game and have at least a check to everything Aster could possibly do. Aster he admits so in his own commentary, he played poorly with his Sylveon, he played poorly with his Milotic, he didn't do very well in a number of areas, and frankly, the fact that he got dominated like that has meant that I've pushed him down quite considerably. He tried to make plays to try and gain back offensive momentum with his Lopunny and things like that, but then Envy just played out of his mind and read Aster like a book, frankly. And when you get read that easily, I'm gonna plummet you, frankly.
Yeah.
Because being readable is something you can work on. You can make yourself less predictable, and Aster just got completely taken advantage of this game. I actually felt bad for him watching it, because despite the fact that it was a lower score line than the Gator versus Crimson matchup, I felt like Envy dominated in a way that even Gator didn't this week. So yeah,
yeah.
When you get that treatment, you're getting lower.
No, that's definitely understandable. Last two teams we'll just talk about in this section. Obviously, for me, I have the Milwaukee Bears at 11. You have the Giants. So for me, Wolf played really well in his week 1. I've actually, funnily enough, kept him in the exact same spot, which is very frustrating because I would have liked to have moved him up more for how well he played, but there were a lot of teams like a bit higher up where there were wins and losses, and again, I wasn't really able to do much changing, but at the same time, I still feel that he played incredibly well. Like we said, Coach Zed didn't really do that great in the matchup, but Wolf being, you know, the player that he is very good at taking advantage of situations, and he did exactly that. Throughout the game, he was always just trying to get himself ahead, and like there was that bit where he was having issues knocking off that Porygon 2 because he was constantly getting paralyzed. But eventually he got it, and that was all good, and he ended up getting the result. The Circuitry set was incredibly solid, put in a massive amount of work, and you know, I feel bad that I'm not moving him up because he won, but with so many other teams plummeting, the platform now is that if they mess up again and Wolf wins again, he will be much higher up on my next rankings. Like I said, I'm a bit tentative because it's just the first week. I don't want to like jump to any conclusions, but I'm very happy with how Wolf played in his week 1.
I'll cover Wolf a little bit later. I've got him quite considerably higher up. I'll talk briefly about Geo here. There are a few positives I have. He's still, for me, 11 to 8 is kind of mixed. You can really put anyone in anywhere there. I liked how quickly he read the situation with Greninja. Metronome is not something that you'd normally consider in those sort of situations, so I liked how quickly he was able to evaluate that. But equally, he prepped too passively in this game and really let Greninja just take bad advantage of him. He ended up losing his Toxapex, which was one of his better ways of dealing with a number of threats on Chimpac's team, and taking a heavy dent in Scizor just to deal with the Greninja. And as a result, I've put him lower. It was not a brilliant prep more than play. He did play well in areas. I believe that Mind Blown actually fails if you attack with under half of your HP. So I think that he needs to buff up on his mechanics a little bit, because he also said, I believe, in his draft analysis that he could use the Z move and then be able to use acrobatics on Archeops and things like that. Just making me a little concerned that he doesn't not understand, but know Gen 7 mechanics as well as he probably should at this stage. And the teams above but I couldn't justify keeping him higher when he did lose.
Yeah, that's fair enough. We will, I guess, to the next teams here. So, again, another team where I wish I could move them up higher, but I didn't want to plummet other teams too low just yet, was the Philadelphia Scizors. I think that Chimp, you know, played quite well. I think it was an interesting matchup because both of them had Mons that could do very well against each other. Obviously, like Geo having Blacephalon, which was very strong against Chimp's team, and then Chimp obviously having Greninja, where he ran that Metronome set, which was very good. I think it was a very back and forth game. It was actually quite close near the end, as Chimp was saying. If Geo maybe brought a couple of different sets, he might have been able to pull off the game. But you know, Chimp played to the best of his ability and read the situation really well, knowing that Geo would have to bring things like Scizor in order to deal with Bulu, which Chimp didn't even bring. So he was able to then bring other Mons that could benefit the situation a bit better. So overall, I think he played quite well, but unfortunately, again, like I said, I'm just not going to move people straight up. Like, it's a good win, it's a good start. Let's see if he can then back this up next week.
Okay. I agree with most of that. I only have him one position higher. It was a close game. It wasn't as dominating as some of the other people I've moved up, which is why I've not got him ridiculously high. It was a very nice prep, I felt. The Scrafty set in particular was very nice. His managing of the Blacephalon situation, again, I think that was a well played on him. I love the fact that I see Metronome being used. It's one of my favorite items to use in the format. And frankly, it led to a good win, and yeah, congratulations, you moved up. I've not moved you up massively, but if this is the way you're going to play every week, then you're going to end up in the top areas of the ranking quite quickly.
Well, my number 9 that I've got chilling down here is the Montreal Habsals. Obviously, you've already discussed a lot of the things with Aster. Again, like, you've dropped him about 4 spots. I think I've done about the same, or 4 or 5 spots. So, he's probably one of the biggest drops that I've done for any team. And I have to agree with you. You kind of, when that happens to you, you kind of have to take the L. And it sucks, because we've all been in that position, unfortunately, where we've been, like, absolutely manhandled. And MV explained it very well in his video that, like, he had answers for literally everything that Aster had. And when your opponent has that, then it's really hard to kind of break out of the cycle. If there's no, like, you know, hidden techs or any cool things that you have, it's really hard to do things that'll shift the momentum of the game. And unfortunately for Aster, it was just a little bit too one-dimensional. But at the same time, it's only 1 week. He's still in, you know, that top 10, which is, you know, quite a solid place to be. But like you said, 8 to 11 is very contentious. So I feel like he's in that area, but he's in that danger zone now of where, you know, 1 more loss and he's going to go down further. So redemption week is coming up for him, and I think he's really got to make a statement coming through. But I agree, like, he got absolutely manhandled.
Yeah, it's a shame, but it happens. I'll briefly talk about Tom then. He's my number 10. I've moved him down quite considerably lower than you have. We both had him in our top 2. He gave up momentum a lot in this game, and he was being very predictable in his switching patterns, and it just allowed Lars to know basically what he was going to do whenever he was going to do it. For example, there was a turn where Tom notes the game shifted on its head, where Swellow was pursuit trapped by Crocodile. But the way that he had been playing before that, with regards to the Rotom and his Diancie situation, and just the way that he was playing all of his mons, including Landorus and stuff, it just means that Lars was comfortable knowing he wasn't going to risk his Swellow in that situation, and it turned what would have been a difficult play for Lars to have to make to one that I think Lars was quite comfortable making in the moment, and he needs to make sure he doesn't give up momentum the way he did. In particular, the opening few turns, I believe it was a roll to Ikkyo the Rotom Wash, and he just gave up so much momentum to the Kyurem really early game, and he knew that the Kyurem was going to be a problem. He knew that. There's no way that he didn't know that. And the amount of momentum he gave up to it, and he escaped through it by the skin of his teeth with his Rotom living on a slither and pain splitting up. But I think that that was a roll to it KO, and when you're relying on rolls and not getting split F drops to avoid basically just getting manhandled by Kyurem in the opening few turns, I'm not impressed. He did manage to regain momentum a few times, but again, he kept on giving it up, and I've moved him down quite considerably as a result.
That's what so I have Tom a little bit higher, so we'll talk about him a bit later on. But moving on to the teams that we currently both have in 8th. So obviously, kind of touched on Geo a bit already for myself. I think that, you know, his prep wasn't the best. However, he was showing shades of what I'm expecting from him this season. There were, like, times when he was making quite good plays, but like you said, it is the big thing that I am worried about is Geo really needs to understand, like, certain things. So obviously the Mind Blown was huge. Understanding, like you said, with the acrobatics, these are mechanics that if he wants to do well with this team this season, he really needs to get a hold of, like, as early as possible. Like,
he didn't actually use Mind Blown in the game, we should clarify that, but he was considering it, and he was Scarf and knocked into it, and if he had tried to use it there, it would have just failed. So, and his mon would have been knocked out as a result. And you do need to know these things before you go into these sorts of games. You do need to understand the mechanics behind them.
For sure, and I think that's the bit that's a little bit concerning. I don't think he necessarily played that badly. I think just Chimp played better, and Chimp probably had better matchup overall just because of how he was able to use the threats on his team to kind of coerce Geo into bringing certain mons that Chimp could kind of match up better against. Like I said, main one being Mega Scizor. Overall, I don't think it's a bad loss for Geo. I think, like I said, I haven't moved him down a considerable amount. I think that he could still bounce back next week. And unlike a lot of other players this week, his loss was actually quite a narrow one. So I definitely see there being an upside to him later on, but I had to move him down a bit for that loss.
On the note of understanding Gen 7 mechanics, and given that you were just talking about Aster, I should clarify, Zoroark does not work the way I said it did in the Week 0 power rankings. It did at the very start of Gen 7, but then they updated it, and it no longer works that way. It does in fact pretend that you are that Mon, as it did in Gen 6 and before. It doesn't tell you what's super effective until you do break the illusion. So I just want to hold my hands up and say, yeah, I messed up there. I didn't understand the mechanic of Zoroark, and so just wanted to say sorry for messing up on that. But anyway, I'll talk about Joey now. I've moved him up a few. I couldn't justify moving him up significantly because in the end he was in a losing position and had to dodge an icy wind in order to win. Obviously that was the way he had to win. It was his path to victory and he took it, and there is benefit in knowing what your play has to be in order to try and win. And he could have done a different play, and he could have just attacked basically and guaranteed the loss, but he did play well around Mono's threats for the most part, but I can't overlook the fact that Mono was in the position to win and had to get unlucky in order to lose, so I can't bump him up significantly in this, despite the fact that he did play well and prep well. I do think that the Z move, it's fortunate that it happened in Week 1, and I hope it doesn't happen again, and at least he's owning up to his mistake, so yeah, it's good to see. But yeah, that's why I've got Joey down at 8 instead of up high like you do.
Yes, I do have Joey a bit high. I will get into that later on, but obviously the person who was playing Mono is the person I have at 7th. So Mono obviously I had 2nd last time, and I think that it's again, this is a situation I guess that goes back to Crimson, but it's a bit different. So obviously Crimson's was more the fact that he had matchup and didn't take advantage. I think for Mono, it wasn't just for me about the Icy Wind miss. Obviously a huge factor in the game, but I just felt that, you know, there were a lot of times that he could have really punched the point home, and, you know, it just, I think that it was a good first show. Obviously Joey is a very good opponent, and Mono is a very good player. The issue for me was that a lot of teams below Mono that were quite close to him had quite solid wins for Week 1, and it was really hard to justify having him higher than a lot of these teams are able to go on and win. I know it's a bit harsh to have him down considerably lower, but he's still in 7th, he's still in the top half, and I still feel like he will bounce back quite well, but I couldn't really justify having him above some of the other teams that we are going to get into talking about.
Okay. Well, I'll briefly talk about Wolfie then. I do disagree with your Mono assessments. I'll cover that actually. With Mono, despite the mistakes he made in regards to not having his Mega Stone and the chances that he had to really push his advantage in the game, he put himself in the position to win. He was going to win in, was it 85% of the situations? But because of an Icy Wind miss, he ended up not being able to. And that does happen. It's hacks, it's part of the game. You do have to manage your luck, basically. But despite the fact that you think he could have pushed his advantage in different places, he was in the position to win. And he was in a very good position, despite the fact that he didn't even have arguably his best Mon in Charizard X, because he didn't have the Mega Ring. And part of that is also why I've bumped him lower myself. He's at my number 5. But when you put yourself in that good a situation, when you've also not brought basically your best Mon in the matchup, it's not something I'm going to punish him by lowering him significantly. And for example, you have Tom higher than you have Mono, and I thought that Mono played significantly better than Tom did this week. But anyway, we'll get to your justifications for Tom when we get to Tom. But for my number 7, I have Wolfie. This was top-notch positioning play. He knew exactly how he was going to win and what he needed to do for that, and that combined with world-class reading of his opponent means that he was just he was never going to lose this game. And if he can do this every week, he's going to be a massive, massive force to be very scared about, I feel, for all the other coaches. His positioning play in terms of organizing the match to make sure that Xurkitree can win, I feel was really, really excellent. His reading of what Coach Zed was going to do, with especially regards to Clefable, was very, very nice to see as well. And frankly, Wolf played really, really well. That's why I've got him quite considerably higher than you have. I think that he did play better than everyone below him on my rankings, basically. I think he just played the game like he knew that he was better and was going to win. And playing with that sort of confidence was very nice to see. Also very nice to see was the fact that he was playing his moves very quickly. This is a bit of a more personal note, but I do like it when people go with their gut and make decisions quickly and are comfortable doing that, as opposed to calculating every possible path, which is what some coaches like to do. And there's no real right way to go about doing it. It's just a personal note. I prefer that style, and I do like to see that Wolfie did really well doing that exact same thing.
So, like you said here, the two teams that we have at number 6 is Joel and the Kansas City Giraffe Chiefs. Honestly, like we said, you know, Steve-O didn't really prep for the game well or make the right plays, but Joel, just one of those games where, like, not only did he have matchup, but he just played accordingly to the matchup. Kind of similar to what you were saying about Wolf. Like, Joel knew what he needed to do, and most of the time what he needed to do was just click 1,000 arrows with Zygarde. So,
I also liked his endgame management. Healing Wishing instead of going for the roll, bringing back the Seismitoad, knowing that you had the investment to live any hits, etc., etc. I did like that endgame management by Jolt significantly. I thought that it was very impressive and just an incredibly impressive victory, in all honesty. So it was very good to see, and frankly, I think he's going to do really, really well this season with this team. I think he's going to be very comfortable.
Yeah, definitely got high hopes for Joel. Next up are the two teams we were talking about just before. I have the Beartics 2 points higher than Luxrays, and I admit there is going to be some contention with this, because obviously, like we said, Mono didn't necessarily play badly. In fact, he played out of his skin for all intents and purposes, which you were talking about. I think, for me, there's a couple of things. One, I think Joey, you know, he also played well. Like, both of them played an incredible game. And I think for me, and this is going to be, potentially some people might find this harsh, but for me, it's a game. And in the game, you risk by using a move like Icy Wind. And although Joey probably should have lost, the fact of the matter is that he didn't.
He won.
And that's the thing. That's the game, because like I've played Monotui, and I played him in a game where I had a 93.5% chance to beat him.
You're not going to shut up about that, are you?
And he crit me. And that's the thing. Like, it doesn't matter how secure you are of the game. If you don't get it done, then that's just it. And so for me, I feel that Joey didn't necessarily play ridiculous. He's only moved up one spot for me overall. But obviously he's considerably higher than you, and I understand why. But for me, I just felt that at the end of the day, it's a win. No matter how you get it, it's a win. And so... It's a win.
To back you up a little bit, because I feel like you're doing a bad job, it was a win, and I thought that he had a terrible matchup here. I think that I predicted Joey to lose this game, and I was close to making my lock of the week in the internal pick'em crew that we have. And I thought that his matchup was awful. I thought that he didn't have much for many of Mono's threats, one of which was Zardex, which didn't come. But his management of things like the Keldeo and the Weavile, which I thought he would struggle against massively, was incredibly impressive. And I think that he played the situation really well in an awful matchup and came through with a victory.
Yeah, I think that pretty much, yeah, it was weird, but I had
and he had an excellent team too, so he is very valuable.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
I was getting there, it's fine. So you basically covered Mono as well, so I think we should move on to the teams that we have in fourth. Obviously a team that I had quite a lot lower, probably unfairly, but you can now give Gator the praise that he deserves.
Well, I mean, it's the first 6-0 win of the season. You can't really take that away from him. And he played really, really well this game. His management with the Heatran was excellent. His management of the threat of the Thunderous was really, really good. Light Screen, he managed to bluff the Scarf, and he ended up getting the situation where the Thunderous was at half health, having revealed that it was a double dancing set, and switched out of your Heatran. I don't agree with him switching out there at all, because he wasn't scared about the Scarf Heatran, because he had an agility up. Like, he knew that he was faster no matter what, but he just switched out because +4 through a Light Screen doesn't actually KO Heatran, and it would have been a complete waste of his Thunderous. He wasted Thunderous anyway. But if that's how you're going to use Heatran, that's how you defend it from criticism of picking it up as a round 1 pick. Because if you're going to play Heatran that well, where if it was counting Stealth Rock kills, it would have gotten 5 kills. Frankly, that's an incredibly impressive use of a mon that I don't particularly rate that highly. And frankly, he played amazingly in this matchup. You covered it yourself. Crimson had a really good matchup. Gator had a bad matchup. And when you 6-0 through a bad matchup, through just sheer strength of play, I think that that's very impressive. And this was one of the best performances I think I've seen Gator have, including in last season, where he just knew everything that was going to happen in the game, and he reacted accordingly. There was never a situation where he was at risk, and he managed the game really well. He played really well. He prepped really well. Everything about it was really well done on his part. And yeah, frankly, the first 6 over season, I'm moving you up significantly.
Yeah, I think the reason why I didn't move him up as high, and like, okay, this is going to come off pretty bad, but the reason why is that I would have moved him up that high if it had been against, you know, like a Mono or an Envy or
right, that does sound
something
bad.
like that. But I just feel that it doesn't carry as much weight against someone like Crimson. And that sounds horrible. I'm sorry, that's not what I'm trying to say. It's just more that I feel
Good luck.
that Crimson could have played a lot better, could have made a lot more aggressive plays and everything. And granted, Gator outplayed him. And I'm not denying that, but I think it would have been more substantial against other people. But regardless, I'm going to move on from all of that because we are into now our top 3.
No, we're not. You need to talk about.
I probably should talk about Tom. All right. Well, so this is again like obviously you had Tom quite considerably lower than I have. I think that, like you said, this was a very close game. I honestly think it was actually a really close game, despite Tom being very obvious and everything. It actually was closer than a lot of people think, and there are a few frustrating turns for Tom. I think that like cutting down the differential by hitting that Stone Edge would have been great, although it would have still been a loss for him. Hitting it would have been nice because then he wouldn't have been like as it wouldn't have been as detrimental throughout the season having that extra -1. I think, like you said, the big turn though was the Pursuit turn. I think if he had attacked with Swallow and potentially like because I believe it was a Scarf Crocodile, obviously Crook would have outsped. But if Pursuit hadn't killed and Swallow was able to get off the Boom Burst onto the Crook, that would have been massive in that game. Because Crook became a very annoying thing, especially at the end against Rotom. If Boom Burst was able to either knock Crook straight out or had damaged it considerably, I think it definitely could have made the battle a lot more interesting. But, I mean, honestly, Tom made a bad play. And that's the thing, Lars made the right play, and that's why Lars is above Tom and Tom is down to 4th. However, I don't feel that Tom necessarily played badly enough for me to drop him down ridiculously low. I think there were a few turns where he didn't make the best plays, but he can build from this, and next week, you know, he's up against Stevo. I think he's got a really good chance of putting in a good performance, so I'm backing him like a few other coaches here, not moving him down too far, backing them to say, like, next week they will bounce back, and if they don't, then I'll happily drop them. But I'm not the kind of person to...
I'll just briefly respond to that then, and I will try and keep it brief. Yes, if he made the good plays, he would have done better. You can say that about anyone who got ranked lower. The fact of the matter is, he played way too predictably in terms of his switching, and gave up momentum frequently, and ended up... you say it was closer, and if he attacked on that turn, then yes, it would have been significantly close, and he probably would have come out with a victory. But he didn't attack on that turn. He didn't read the situation. He didn't think Pursuit was a risky move that Lars could click. Whereas for Lars, it was... I'm certain that Lars was comfortable. He doesn't do live comms, unfortunately, so we can't get his opinion. But in that turn, I'm certain that Lars was comfortable making that Pursuit play, knowing full well that he was going to get a kill. Because Tom showed in his play that he wasn't going to risk it in that situation. And when you play like that, people will take advantage of it.
It just gives Tom, I guess, then more... Again, like the other people, it's just... Next week is a big week. If he doesn't perform again, I will happily drop him down. If he doesn't get the result, he will go down. And that's with a lot of teams that I've got a lot higher than people might expect. I'm giving him a chance. If they don't perform, though, they will get dropped. And that's the thing. And other people who are down lower, if they do win again, they're definitely going to go up. But it was an interesting first week when it came to a lot of these games. And we've still got 3 more teams to discuss. So let's just try and move on to them and discuss them, and then we'll look to the next week ahead. So, as we go here to the top 3, we have all 3 of the same teams, just in completely different order. I guess the first thing we'll discuss is the New Orleans Pelicans. Not much... I mean, I just feel that for John, he's quite a seasoned veteran now when it comes to draft format, and, you know, Aaron, as he said, was still learning the game, but I feel... You know, John's prep was quite good. He played quite well. Felt pretty comfortable throughout the game.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I had him quite highly rated, and he performed well. The reason I've not got him higher than he is for me is that, frankly, he was against the team that we both had at last, and I think that does kind of take away from it. It was... I think Aaron's first game in a draft league format, and it kind of showed. It was very nice prep with the Hariyama. The plays he made were good. It was good game management with Cresselia and the Hariyama against things like the Mimikyu to minimize the risk. But he played really well against someone that isn't really familiar in the format. I couldn't justify him putting him in my top 2. But he played really well, he prepped really well, and just well done.
Yeah. Very much as we say, it was like pretty... That one was probably the most straightforward game we could talk about. But moving on to, I guess, the person that I've got at number 3, and maybe you talk about your number 2 in a second. Obviously, I have Lars. Kind of already talked about a lot of the stuff. Like, Lars played very well, like you said, kind of read a lot of Tom's plays and made the right decisions, and... I had to put him higher than Tom because not only did he beat Tom, but also, like I said, that pursuit turn was massive. Knowing that Tom was going to switch and he'd get the kill, even if like Swallow kicked Boom Burst, I'm pretty sure Pursuit Plus, I'm pretty sure the Swallow was toxic, so it would have died anyway. But regardless, I think that, you know, Lars made the right plays, and it's a good stepping stone because this team is so strong as it is that it needed a good week 1 performance, and he backed it up there. So, chucked him up into 3rd spot for that one.
Yeah, I'll talk about Lars in a minute, but first I'll talk about my number 2, which is Envy. Envy dominated Aster. I talked about him significantly when we were talking about Aster, but he just dominated, more so even than Gator, against a guy who I personally rate quite highly, Aster. I think he's a good battler. And he didn't give Aster a sniff. He prepped amazingly. Aster didn't have a mod on his team that could actually break what Envy brought. And that game, you can replay that game with the same teams and the same people 50 times, 100 times. Envy wins all of them because he had everything in his team builder that he needed. All that he was afraid of was consecutive crits or something. And even then, it probably wouldn't have been enough. he prepped amazingly and played accordingly, and as a result, I hold up my hands and say, yeah, I was too harsh in my week 1, in my week 0 even, and not putting him higher because he used the team really well. Although, Empoleon, still not a good defogger.
Yes, unfortunate.
I'll defend. It doesn't matter if he brings it like 13 games this season and it keeps rocks off every game and never dies. I'm still gonna stick to Empoleon as a bad defogger.
And that's fair enough. I mean, like, it's not the best defogger in the world, but we're not going to get into this conversation. I have Chimp, not Chimp. Why? I keep saying it because his team is the Chim Chargers, and it always throws me off. But
dude, like, I've done that about 8 times. I initially had them in the wrong place because I thought that MV was the Philadelphia, and it's been ongoing since he took that name.
Bless. I think they must have done it to troll us, but regardless, I have MV at number 1. It was really hard. Like, obviously I had him at 7th, moving up to 1st, but what I looked at was all the teams that were above him that won, and the 2 teams were John of the New Orleans Pelipers and Joey of the Bronx Bantix. And when it comes to those 2 guys winning their games compared to how MV won his, for me it was pretty much a no-brainer moving MV up into 1st from that group. I think what he did as well was he kind of showed that although we didn't have a lot of faith in his team maybe to begin with, like it wasn't, you know, the best MV draft that we had seen, he backed it up in this game and showed just how ridiculous it can be in certain matchups. I do believe, though, that in the matchup against Aster, regardless of the 6 they both brought, I feel just on paper, he had such a strong matchup heading into it. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays against other people with this team where maybe the matchup isn't as favourable. But I mean, like you said, there's not really much else I can add on, but like turn to turn, like he just was insanely good and just handled the game perfectly, and it was just pretty much an ideal game. So it's really hard to not put him number 1. But I also understand why you've got Lars in 1st. Like that 1 to 3, well maybe like, yeah, I'd say 1 to 3 could have really gone anyway for me.
For me, it was a top 2. I think that John was a solid 3rd, but I put Lars at number 1 above MV. The large reason for that is I already had Lars very high, and MV was considerably lower. You talked about moving him up from 7 to number 1. I moved him up from 11 to number 2. But yeah, MV probably played better than Lars did in this game, but both Lars was already higher ranked for me, and Lars played someone who I think has one of the best drafts, and really played really well, and read the situation very nicely. The only criticism I have of him is very similar to the criticism that I had with Geo, in regards to that he needs to know the Gen 7 mechanics regarding move orders, because I believe he said that he actually timed out on a turn because he was researching the way that Intimidate worked versus Turbo Blaze. It's not Turbo Blaze, it's the other one, isn't it? That one. But you do need to know those things, but it's a small thing, and he did know it, and then second-guessed himself, so I'm not really going to criticize him for that much. He played really well, and against someone that I had rated higher than I'd rated Envy's opponent, and yeah, I feel more comfortable moving a guy from 3rd up to 1st after beating the number 2 ranked team than I do moving a guy from 11 up to 1st after beating my number, what is it, number 9 ranked team, I believe? Number 8?
You actually had Envy 12th.
12, my bad.
Nah, I definitely understand that. I mean, honestly, Lars definitely deserves it. He did play incredibly well. But that is going to do it, guys, for week 1 of the Power Rankings. Obviously, some contentious stuff there. I think after the second week, things will be a lot clearer because, as you can see, Abe and I, we grade things in a very different way. But at the same time, like I said, when the second week of battles are done, and you know some teams that maybe had big wins week 1 have losses, or they back it up and get another win, and some teams go to 2 losses, we'll get a bit of a clearer picture, and there won't be as much like division between Abe and I on our picks. But we hope you have enjoyed this video and the discussion we had. If you have, make sure that you like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the GBA channel and check out all the coaches that should be in the link in the description. And stay tuned, I guess, for us next week.
Peace.
I wasn't even going to do like the peace thing there. I was going to be like, anything you want to say before we go away?
and